Welcome to Food for Thought, providing real-world inspiration for living compassionately, sustainably, and healthfully for humankind, animal kind, and the ecosystems we all depend on. Thank you for listening if you're new. Thank you for listening if you've been listening for years. Today's episode is coping with the loss of a pet, mourning, healing, and honoring the animals we love. Hi, everyone. This is going to be a rough episode. I wanted to just call it a Charlie-shaped hole, but I wanted to make sure the title was as inclusive as possible because I am recording this and sharing this with you, not just for me. It is certainly part of my healing process after losing Charlie, but it's also for you. So the hope and the intention is that it might be part of your healing process as well. When I recorded podcast episode, my goodness, now a decade and a half ago when Simon died, and I shared that episode with you, I was just so touched by how many people were moved by it and how it helped so many people. So that's what the intention is with this episode. I suspect there'll be a lot of pausing the recording for me and starting again. We'll see. But that's okay. I just don't want to wait any longer to do it. So a couple quick announcements before we get on to the episode. I'm trying something new. You know, I've had different Compassion in Action conferences in the past. Some of you have been here at my home. Some of you have been here in Oakland, where we held 3 different conferences over the course of a few years. And I've done some online workshops as well, online conferences. And I'm trying something new over on Substack to hold a mini course over the course of 4 days, just short 30-minute sessions to empower you and invigorate you. The intention is to give you inspiration and tools for increasing our compassion for ourselves, for others, for the animals, and for the earth. And so each session is going to include a short talk by me, a 10-minute mindfulness exercise, and a Q&A. So the first session is on Monday, May 26th. It is open to everyone, and the rest are exclusive to paid subscribers who will also get access to the open chat thread all week and who can ask questions and connect. I mean, even beyond that, that's one of the perks of being a paid subscriber. And so instead of having this be a one-time payment and a one-time event, we're trying something new. And so just remember that once you become a paid subscriber, if you're interested in this 4-day mini course, you also continue to get all of the perks for subscribers, for paid subscribers. And that includes daily inspiration, really for everyone, but daily inspiration, exclusive articles, exclusive recipes, exclusive cooking demos, resources and recommendations. Paid subscribers comment on posts, they can access the subscriber chats that I mentioned, and enjoy connections with like-minded community members. So I hope you join the party for the mini course and also for more of this connection. Finally, regarding our trips, Joyful Vegan Tuscany has a couple rooms left, and Joyful Vegan Northern Italy has 1 room left. We almost sold out within 24 hours. We sold out everything except 1 room. And that was when it was still just an exclusive offer to people who had been on the pre-registration list. So I said this before, if there's a trip that I'm hosting over with World Vegan Travel and you're interested, pre-register, because you get the first exclusive link and then it goes out to the public. So for pre-registering, you don't have to put any money down. It's not like a deposit at all. It just says that you are very interested. So any trip you see for World Vegan Travel, whether I'm hosting a trip or not. We have a few rooms, actually quite a few rooms for Japan because we added a second Japan. So now we have 2 back-to-back trips to Japan. This is all in 2026. So I hope you can join me for Northern Italy, 1 room left, Tuscany, a couple rooms left. Also, some people do both trips. Tuscany and Northern Italy, they're not 10-day trips. I guess Northern Italy is a 9-day trip, and then Tuscany is an 8-day trip. So you can easily take 2 weeks off and enjoy both Tuscany and Northern Italy. And then we offer a special if you do both trips. And that special is that we pay for your first class train ride from Florence when the Tuscany trip ends to Milan, where the Northern Italy trip begins, and 2 nights in the Milan hotel. And then the trip begins in Milan and we have the most amazing time. So go over to joyfulvegantrips.com. That links you over to the trips at World Vegan Travel that you can book. So here we go. One of the things I wrote, it's already tough. One of the things I wrote when Charlie first died is I shared a post that said I didn't want to talk about Charlie's death, that I wanted to talk about his life because the grief was just too near. I still want to talk about his life, but I feel I need to talk about his death as well. The grief is still very near. It's possibly the most amount of grief I have ever felt losing an animal. Not that we have to compare, because they all had different circumstances, losing Simon, Schuster, Cassandra, and Charlie is the fourth, and by far his death has been the hardest. Charlie had more life and more light than any animal I've ever known. Truly. Which also meant Charlie was a handful. He was a handful I loved. He was a big presence. And perhaps that's one of the reasons it's hit so hard. I don't know, but it's hit really hard. So today I want to talk about Charlie and the grief and pain of losing an animal, especially unexpectedly, especially when there's remorse and guilt surrounding their death. I think it's pretty rare for a death to be really clean and simple and beautiful, and Charlie's wasn't. So I want to talk about it now because, as I said, it's helpful for me, and I hope it will be helpful for you, and because I want to share who he was with the world. I'll be honest that as I wrote this, it was rough. It was really rough. And I spoke some of the text. I was using kind of voice to text when I was recording some of this. I was writing as well, typing, but I was also doing voice to text because I could just kind of say more faster, more easily. But oh yeah, it was pretty rough. So I miss him so much, but I don't want any more time to pass because I do feel that honoring our loved ones when we talk about them and say their name is part of the healing process, as is telling their stories and sharing who they were. This goes for whether we're losing human animals or non-human animals. And I do think it is part of the healing process. It's hard. It doesn't mean this is going to be easy or has been easy since I've been writing this for a couple of weeks now, but I don't want any more time to pass. And I want it to also help someone else out there. And I also want his story to be out in the world because he was kind of amazing. He really was the most intelligent, intuitive, brave, light-filled, resilient, joyful, funny, handsome, social being I've ever known. You would walk into the house and there he would be at the door. And if he wasn't at the door in the foyer, he would be coming down the stairs or running into the foyer from wherever he was because he heard the door open or perhaps heard me come up the stairs, prior to the door even opening. And this wasn't just for me. It was always for me, but it was for anyone who came into the house. And we have a pretty active house. There are a lot of friends coming and neighbors coming, and our contractor who's always here because we're always fixing something or, doing something in the house. But it was certainly every time a friend came over. And Charlie was very headstrong. And I know that it really drove David crazy sometimes. And it drove me crazy sometimes because he's very persistent. He was very persistent. He was very headstrong. And sometimes he drove me crazy when, for instance, I wanted to play with Michiko and Charlie just wanted to be part of it. He wanted to be the center all the time. And I just wanted for Michiko to have some time to play or time to just get attention. And I always made sure she did. I always made sure that both of them had equal time as much as I was able to do that. But sometimes it was just like, Charlie, just give Michiko time. But he just wanted to be there in the center. Sometimes it drove me crazy when I would eat my popcorn at night watching a movie, and Charlie loved popcorn. And sometimes I would be like, Charlie, stop. But I would still give him popcorn. So not great for disciplining anyone and trying to steer them away from the behavior that you're trying to deter. So I always gave in. I did. And it became a ritual. It really was a ritual, even though sometimes I'd be like, Charlie, stop. It would be a ritual. I don't know if you remember, but I have a very particular way of eating popcorn. That's not for this day, but I would eat off the hull first, and then I would put all of the balls in a bowl. I still do this. This is how I've eaten popcorn since I was a kid. And so I always felt safe giving Charlie popcorn because I wasn't giving him popcorn with the really rough hull that could, lead to choking for people and for animals. And so it was this ritual. I would, eat my hull and then put the balls in a bowl. And then I would, periodically give him a ball, and he would just grab my hand because he wanted the popcorn. Sometimes, not often, maybe once or twice, I would put him in my office so that I could eat my popcorn without having to share it. But most of the time I shared it. So sometimes it was like, Charlie, why? And then the thing that annoyed David about Charlie was that he would always jump on the counter or the dining room table, but not just willy-nilly when people were here. And I know that he did it because Charlie wanted to just be at your eye level. He wanted to be where you were. He wanted to be in the presence of you or people who came over. So the dining room table, he didn't jump up on, like if we were eating. I mean, he would jump up on my chair and pretend he wanted to just be on my lap, but he really wanted my food. And we wouldn't let him do that. We really wouldn't. I was not the disciplinarian. I am not the disciplinarian in the house very much. And Charlie just required consistent discipline because of those things. But when someone came in and he went into the kitchen, we usually kind of go right into the kitchen. He would always jump up on the counter and it would drive David crazy, but I just felt like he wanted to be acknowledged. He wanted to be seen. I mean, I think most animals are like this, or I should say cats or small animals who, they're little, they're small. They want you to be at their eye level. And so if you didn't kneel down to him and bow down to him, he would jump up so that he could be at your eye level. So he was just a big personality, was always in the center of things. But I loved him so much. So I met Charlie. Some of you may have heard the story if you read the post, but I met Charlie on the street of our old neighborhood. I used to run in that old neighborhood, and I was finishing up a run. And look, if I see a cat on the street anywhere, to this day, I have some cat friends on the street that we live on now. I don't run as much, but I walk a lot. And so I have to greet every cat I see. And so more than him just being a cat, I saw he was a black and white tuxedo. And if you remember, Simon and Schuster were black and white tuxedos. And yes, if you're thinking, yes, Michiko's also a black and white tuxedo. I just have a thing for black and white tuxedos. So here was this adorable black and white tuxedo on the sidewalk. I knelt down to greet him, at which point he jumped into my lap and he put each of his paws on each of my shoulders. And I was immediately smitten. And I looked around to see where he came from or where he lived. And I was close to our old house. Like, this was in our old neighborhood. And we lived on a street that was pretty, well, it wasn't like a hill like we live on now, but the street the street I was on where I met Charlie was just a level street. And then going up to our house was just a hill. It was up this very steep street. I know I tend to live on hills. I guess I really like incline. So I wasn't far from where we lived. And I looked around and I thought, he's sitting in front of this house. I bet he lives in this house. So I just kind of used my instinct and I knocked on the door. And indeed, the couple who answered said, yep, he lives here. And he had just been recently rescued, probably a couple months, not more than that. And he had been rescued from an ashram who'd been using him as a mouser. So he was probably about 5 months, 6 months young. He was still young, but, fully weaned, and he was neutered. I think had just been neutered. And I don't remember how they got him, but they adopted him and they adopted another cat as well. So we're thinking he was about 6 months. And I have pictures from when he first came. So he was like yeah, he was like 6 months, 7 months. No older than 8 months. I don't think. And he hadn't been with them very long, but they adopted him to give him a forever home. However, he was also adopted with another cat, and I'll come back to that. So I fell in love with him immediately, and I would often walk or run down. I'd have to come down my street to run on the level streets or to go to Mills College, which wasn't far from our house. And they had a track. So we would run around the track or we'd run around the campus. And so I would come down to see Charlie and I would go to meet him. And I would bring David. I would bring David to meet Charlie. And yes, his name was Charlie. And we kept his name. I tried to change his name when we did take him in to Oliver, because I love the name Oliver. But he was Charlie. He was just Charlie. So we just kept, I switched to Oliver. After a couple weeks, I'm like, no, you're Charlie. So we kept Charlie. So I would bring David down to see Charlie because he was just adorable. And David is my amazing husband who loves our cats. Well, now cat, and always loved our cats. But David is not like a cat person. He would not ever invite me to come see a cat. Let's just put it that way. So I would invite David to come down, this adorable black and white tuxedo cat who had a white tip on his tail, and he was just adorable. So also I would see him with the couple. They were dog walkers, and I would see him walk with them and the dogs they walked. He was just social. He loved people. He loved other animals. He just wanted to be in the thick of it. So about a month or two after I had fallen in love with him, and it was clear that we had fallen in love with each other, the couple invited me to adopt him. They told me that he had a forever home, like he was theirs, but he was getting lost in the shuffle. They already had a couple dogs, and it wasn't that they were dumping him at all. They were like, he's with us, but he is getting lost in the shuffle because the other cat they adopted was pregnant and they didn't know it. So now she had kittens. And so they were managing kittens. They were managing this cat they adopted. They may have even had another cat. I don't think they did. It wasn't like a hoarding situation. And Charlie, being Charlie's personality, he was like this from the beginning. He kind of really wanted to get in on things and was jealous when the kittens were getting attention and this other cat was getting attention. So they said he's fine, but he's getting lost in the shuffle. And if we wanted to, he was ours to adopt. And it kills me to even say this because I know you're going to think I'm a horrible person, but I regretfully declined. I'm not a horrible person, but the reason I declined was we had lost Simon not that long before. Now, it would have been April 2010 this was happening, and Simon died in August of 2009. So you might think, well, that's plenty of time. But we had also taken in another cat named Cassandra, who our neighbors just a couple houses down had pretty much stopped taking care of. Also, Schuster was Simon's buddy, friend, brother. They were the only two in the litter. They were very, very, very close. So I was I was helping Schuster adjust to having lost Simon and also adjusting to having Cassandra in. And my hands were full, and I clearly am not one of these people who can have more than two cats. Like I can foster and keep them separate, but I'm not someone who just feels like, yes, I can just take on more than I know my gut says I can take on. And this was at a time when I was writing 3 books at a time and really busy and working really hard and, also just doing my life, living my life, working out, being a wife, throwing parties, being an activist. I'm sure we were doing, gardening and things in the house. We did renovate some in that house, and we were also renovating the yard. So, it was like, I felt like my hands were full. And so I said, I'm so sorry, but I don't think we can. And so about a week after, and you know how the story ends, so calm down. So about a week or so after I said no, I saw a post on our neighborhood listserv that said a black and white cat was missing from his home. And I don't think they had a picture. So I reached out to the couple. I think I emailed them, the couple who had Charlie. And I said, oh my God, is it Charlie who was missing? And they said, no, it was a different cat. But they said actually, because I think the cat had been missing for several days. So I think that's why we didn't see a picture, but they said, no, 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 that was not Charlie. However, Charlie hasn't been home since the night before. And I was gutted because I felt like if something had happened to Charlie, it was my fault because I didn't take him in to protect him, because the house he lived in, this couple, they basically let him come and go through a cat door. And I just don't feel like that's safe. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I know people do, and there's reasons for it. I can't do that. I would not be able to do that. And so I just felt really worried about him, and I was just terrified something had happened to him. So I took it upon myself to drive around the neighborhood, asking anyone I saw if they spotted a black and white tuxedo cat. I may have even had a picture of him. I probably did. And no one had. And so I asked people to look under houses and in their garages, maybe took some numbers. And then I drove to the city shelter, the Oakland shelter, and I wanted to see if any cat had met his description who had been, who had arrived, either alive or dead. And no one had. And I was relieved, but I felt so bad and so guilty. And I remember this day really well because I had to go into San Francisco. It's the time where I used to go into San Francisco to get my hair done, my hair cut and highlighted. And I was frantic because I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in the neighborhood. And I also remember this day because it was the day I heard from my literary agent that Random House wanted to buy the 30-day vegan challenge in a preemptive offer. And it was a really big deal. Big deal. Random House wanted my book. But all I could think of was this cat. All I could think of was Charlie. And so I'm sitting at the chair at the hairdresser's, and I remember emailing and texting the couple and asking them if Charlie had come back, and he hadn't. And I asked a couple times and he hadn't. And finally I took it upon myself and I said, when Charlie comes through that door, assuming he will, we would take him in and make him ours. And I don't usually do something like that without checking with David. I don't believe I checked with David. He knew I was frantic. He knew how much I loved this cat. But I think it was one of those cases where I didn't tell him. And I know he would have left it up to me because he knew I fell in love with Charlie. But the hilarious thing is that within 15 minutes of my telling them that, I got a message back from them telling me that Charlie had just walked in the door. I think he was waiting outside the door, listening or reading the emails. I don't know. But that is when I reached out to David and I said, we're taking Charlie home. And that day, I remember going and getting beds and toys and things, collars, and I went to that house and I scooped him up and I brought him home for good. And that was in April of 2010. Now, Charlie had essentially been an outdoor cat his whole life, including when he was being used at the ashram, as well as once he was rescued. So again, let's say he's 6, 7, 8 months. He loved being outside, and it was quite an adventure for him. The house we had at the time had a closed-in yard. We built a fence. It was quite a tall fence. And I used to say that our yard wasn't cat-proof as much as it was Simon and Schuster proofed, because they would come outside with me for hours and hours and hours, and that's where I would work, and they would stay with me, and they really didn't try to escape. Like, I don't even remember. I don't have a memory of that at all. I mean, I remember maybe Simon did, because Simon was also a big personality and also a handful. I'm remembering that in the beginning of me letting out Simon and Schuster, I had them on a leash because I was scared they were going to run over the fence. Maybe Simon ran over the fence sometimes. I don't know. But eventually it wasn't an issue with Simon and Schuster. And it was definitely not an issue with Schuster, who was Buddha. He was basically Buddha. He was flawless. So he stayed with me all the time. Not so Charlie. He was just one of those beings who, if he was kept in, he wanted to see what was on the other side of that fence. Like, he just needed to see what was on the other side. And even though he had the run of the entire yard, he wanted to know what was on the other side of that fence. So he would escape again and again and again and again. And so finally I decided to cat-proof the fence. I don't know if you've seen these. You can get these extenders that go up on the top of a fence, and they basically bend the angle inward. So a cat they can't skirt around the angle and climb up. So we spent a lot of money. Charlie, I said Simon proofing, Charlie proofing this whole yard. And it was a lot. I mean, it was hundreds of dollars to do this, close to 1,000. I mean, it was a lot of money. And Charlie would find the areas, the corners where he could escape through. He was so clever. He was so smart. So he would find and I'd go, how did you? So I'd watched him one day and okay, that's how he got out. Because he would go right to the same spot, right? Of course. So we kind of shored that up. He would do it again. He would short it up. And it became pretty stressful because as soon as he would get out, I would freak out. I'm someone who's very protective. I'm probably overprotective, but I would really panic whenever he left the yard because I was terrified. I was terrified he was going to get hit by a car. And this happened over and over again. And it stopped being fun. It wasn't fun. Now, interestingly, he never went back down to that house down the street. Like, that's not where he would run off to. He would just either go on the other side of the fence and be in the front yard, or he would kind of walk around in other areas on the upper part now where we were, where it was level, as opposed to going down the hill to his old house. So I think that's kind of interesting. But it was just really stressful. And I remember a couple months in, I called the couple and I asked what they thought because I was feeling really embattled. And this was just, I love being wrong. Lessons in gifts. It's what I say all the time. And I was really battling Charlie. It was a battle. And this is when I realized I needed to stop fighting him and I needed to trust him. I wasn't going to return him, but I was really feeling frustrated. I really was not going to return him, but I felt really frustrated. And so one of the things I identified was when he would get out, he would just go to the front yard. He really he wouldn't go that far. I think I already alluded to this. I am not someone who has indoor outdoor cats who just who just go and come and go when they want. I choose when they go outside. So what the deal was when I would go out back, when I was home and go out back, that's when Simon, Schuster, Charlie could come with me. And then when I went back inside, that was it. You're back inside. And, our time outside is over. And luckily, Charlie, amazingly, was someone who was fine with that. Once I let him inside, he was fine. And of course, same thing with Simon and Schuster. Cassandra, the kitty we kind of took in, I had already built a fort for her in the front porch. So she was mostly an outdoor, she was an outdoor cat. I can't even say she was mostly. When we brought her in, especially during the cold, kind of cold winter, rainy nights, she would howl and she just wanted to go back outside. Now I had created this amazing shelter for her, so she was quite content to be out there, but she just wanted to be outside. Charlie would be fine once I brought him in, but he just kept escaping. And so after talking to the couple and realizing that, I wasn't going to return to him, I needed to make this work and I wanted to make this work. And I realized I had to stop fighting him and just trust him. So I tore down all of the cat-proof fencing. I gave it away. I didn't just throw it out. I gave it away. I tore it all down. And David was like, you are not going to be able to do this. You are not going to be able to manage letting him outside, knowing that he's going to roam and being okay with that. And my answer was, I'm going to be okay with it because I watched Charlie and I was like, I'm going to trust him. I'm going to let him guide me and teach me how to manage this. And I mean that. I trusted him because I saw who he was and I saw what he did. And once I let him inside, he was fine, but he wanted to just have a little freedom. He was smart. He was street smart. He would, yes, he would run across the street, but he didn't go out for hours on end. He'd have a little time. Sometimes he'd stick around, but it worked. And I let him teach me how to manage him. And I learned. Now, at the time, as I mentioned, we had Schuster and Cassandra, and Schuster being the second half of his brother, Simon, who died the year before. Simon died from irritable bowel disorder. And Simon had been a pretty large personality, but it really worked with Simon and Schuster because they really were just litter mates. They were the only two. And even though Simon was dominant and a bit of a pain also, Schuster was Buddha, and he was just the most agreeable, sweetest, calmest, most meditative cat I've ever known. He was an absolute love. He was flawless. And which is why when Simon died, and he was grieving, I wanted to give him time to be on his own, and I just wanted to indulge him and be loved by me and David. But I did bring Charlie in when I was still trying to indulge Schuster. Now, if you've been listening for a long time, you might remember that Schuster had Addison's disease, which is extremely rare in cats. I tell the story about how we don't know how it developed, but it was at a time when I was giving Simon and Schuster just 100% plant-based vegan food. And so for 6 years, Schuster had Addison's disease. He developed it, and he would have Addisonian seizures. So to stop the Addisonian seizures, we had him on prednisolone to help his body function. So basically, when you have Addison's, you don't produce enough cortisol, which is the hormone needed to respond to stress. And so prednisone and prednisolone essentially stepped in to do what his adrenal glands could not. But the risk of having him on prednisone or prednisolone is a little bit of a more mild steroid. The risk was that he could potentially develop diabetes. Up to that point, for 6 years, he was on a very low dose of prednisolone, low enough so that we would not, impact him in that way, but high enough that it would, stop the Addisonian seizures and treat the Addison's disease. So at that point, like, he was fine. There was no indication that he was headed in that direction until Charlie arrived. And once Charlie came into our lives, coincidentally, I don't understand what happened. It was probably just stress that Schuster's body just chemically responded to. Schuster developed diabetes. It was devastating. It was really difficult. I had to learn to prick this perfect cat and to test his blood sugar levels. I know there's new ways to do that now, but I had to prick him, and I had to inject him with insulin almost every day. It was really hard to do that to the most gentle cat and not be able to tell him why I was doing that. But I figured it out, and we did it. Also, Cassandra, something shifted for her, and she went into kidney failure when Charlie came home. So she was old and just crotchety. She was old and rickety. Like, she was just an old lady, just a cranky old lady. And I loved her to bits and pieces, but she was a cranky old lady. And so she went into kidney failure. Now, as I said, the neighbors stopped taking care of her, never asked about her again. I was still being respectful, and I'm certain 100% that I told them she went into kidney failure, never responded. And so we brought her to the vet, and she went on to dialysis for 2 or 3 days. At the end of time, we took her home because we hoped that she would turn around, but she never did. And sadly, we had to let her go. And it was a really dramatic goodbye, because the day after she came home from the hospital, David was leaving for work. And before he did, control freak that I am, I was like, go say goodbye to Cassandra. Go say goodbye to Cassandra. She's on our bed. Go say goodbye to her. And he did. And when he came out of the room, he told me that she bit him. And I was like, oh my God, like, she had never done that. Like, she was someone you had to kind of watch, because she could be someone who would just swipe at you. But it was clear she was in a lot of pain, because she never bit us ever. And it was really sad, because David had a gig. So I think it was the next day. David stayed home because of back pain, but he had a gig that night. David was in a band, and he was complaining about his back, but his hand. And I looked at his hand where she had bit him, and it did look like a little irritated, but we figured we'll just put some medicine on it, and it will, heal. We'll put some antibiotic cream on it. But we did wind up getting a doctor's appointment, because Cassandra that next day when David was home from work, she was declining rapidly. She was very clearly at the end. And we called our vet, and we decided that the most compassionate thing to do for her would be to ease her suffering and say goodbye to her and bring her into our vet. For Simon and Schuster, we were able to at least have them home, and Dr. Jenny came to the house, but this was kind of an emergency situation with Cassandra, and I was really grateful to be able to bring her in to euthanize her there. But at that point, David's hand was swelling up really badly, and we had the doctor's appointment for a couple hours after that. So we got to the vet, and she looked at his hand, and she looked up his arm where there was a red line going up his arm, which indicated blood poisoning. And she said, you need to go to the doctor or the emergency room right now. So very sadly, I wouldn't say we rushed. It wasn't like we rushed and then left, but we really had to expedite euthanizing Cassandra, because we needed to get David to the hospital, and she was in discomfort. And we had a really lovely goodbye for her, and we had to let her go. So we get to the doctor, and he was put on antibiotics, and very disappointingly, he was not able to play that night. That was the most disappointing thing for him. So there's a lot of sadness, a lot of disappointment, a lot of drama. And so for the next year, it was Charlie and Schuster without Cassandra. And Schuster was now on his insulin, and he was doing fine. And Charlie was all over Schuster, just like he wanted to be close to him, just like he wanted to be close to everybody. And Charlie would just consume you. That's what he did. He would just consume you. And Schuster would just kind of stand there and go, all right, all right, all right. I guess that's just what's happening. And, Simon, I always call Charlie Simon when I'm telling the story. It's so weird. I did it when Charlie was sick and dying, and I kept calling him Simon. It was like, and I hadn't ever called him Simon all those years, but it was like this whole, I don't know, kind of amalgamation of all of the cats who'd been in my life and all these black and white tuxedos. Charlie wanted to be with Schuster, and he would grab Schuster's body and just groom him. And Schuster took it. He handled it. He loved, he loved Charlie. He did. But he did look kind of overwhelmed sometimes by it. And so they had a lovely relationship. I have lots of photos of Charlie and Schuster together. Not like it was when Simon was alive and it was Simon and Schuster and they were just inseparable. So it wasn't exactly like that, but it was lovely. They had a relationship and they loved each other, and they were together for a year. In July of 2011, really, really, really difficult experience. My friend Michael was dying from a very tragic and unnecessary error in judgment made by an anesthesiologist. And so for 3 days, I went back and forth in late July between San Francisco. We were holding vigil for Michael while he essentially lay in a coma, and to Oakland, where Schuster was rapidly declining. So Michael died on July 28th, and Schuster died days later on August 2nd. It wasn't a great time. It wasn't a great time for me. It wasn't a great time for Michael's loved ones. And it wasn't a great time for Charlie. Charlie grieved Schuster. He really grieved Schuster. He also knew Michael. Michael stayed with Charlie and Schuster when we were in Ireland. God, this would have been earlier in 2011, I think, or maybe it may have been later 2010. And so Charlie grieved Schuster and spent a lot of time in that spot in the yard where we euthanized Schuster. And we cremated Schuster, and we put his engraved box next to the engraved box of Simon's ashes. And as much as I would have thought Schuster's death would have broken me, and that I would have needed to grieve for a very long time before even thinking about getting another cat, I knew in my heart that I wanted another cat for me and for Charlie. I knew I wanted a black and white tuxedo, and so I started looking on Pet Finder to adopt another black and white tuxedo. David had only one request about who we would adopt, and that was that she be female, because we had had a lot of male energy with Simon and Schuster, and now we had Charlie, and he had fallen in love with Cassandra, and she was a female. And so my criteria were black and white tuxedo, who was in a foster situation, possibly living with other cats, because I was bringing her into a house where we had a cat, and female. So that was basically it. And so I found a video on Pet Finder of the most adorable cat. The listing indicated that she was part of a litter, but all the other cats had been adopted. And so the video I saw was her playing with some toys, like some feather toys and little fishing toys. And I knew right away that she was my cat. She was my cat. So I'm not going to tell her whole story here because this is Charlie's story. But let's just say a week later, we brought home in October 2011 our baby girl princess, Michiko, who is perfect. She's perfect. And she's still with us. So 14 years, right? 14 years now, almost. She's over 14 because she would have been born several months before that. But in October 2011, we brought her home. And A few months later, we moved out of the house we were in and into the house we're in now, my dream house called Little Montali. We named it Little Montali after a place we love in Umbria, Italy called Country House Montali. And the thing I was most concerned about was how are we going to figure out a way for both Charlie and Michko to enjoy outdoor time in this new house. Now, I don't think Michko was going out much at the time. If she did, she was just in our yard, in the old yard, and didn't try to escape. But with Charlie having more freedom, who was able to go beyond the boundaries of that fence I described, but always coming back and only having a short time outside, and being fine once we brought him in, how was I going to do this in this house? Any of you who've seen this property, either coming for the conference, if you were in the VIP, coming here, or if you've just seen pictures, it is a very different house. There is no way to fence it. There's no way to fence it. 100% no way to fence it. No way to keep him in. It would have, I don't even want to say would have been an expensive endeavor. It would have been impossible to fence this place in. It is just, we're on a hillside and we are in a very unique wooded area, and there's just no way we would have been able to do it. So how was I going to figure out how to let Charlie be outside, give him outside time that he loved so much, making sure he was safe, making sure I'd be able to emotionally, mentally handle this because, oh my God. And once again, Charlie led the way. He forced me to trust him. It was a transition. I did it slowly. I used treats. People, when they see videos of Charlie and Michko also outside, they ask, how did you do that? Treats. I'm a parent. I would be outside with him. He would only go outside when I went outside. Never, ever, ever, ever at night, not even in the evening, Charlie would not be able to go outside. Don't have a cat door. Didn't let him go out when he wanted. It was when I went outside. We had a whole ritual for 13 years. I mean, he was here with us in this house for 13 years. We've been here for 13 years. He's been here the whole time. And so is Michko. And so we had a transition. We would only go out, it was a short time, only when, I shook the treats and he would stay with me. It was a long, long process. And he taught me again that he was able to do this, that he was able to handle it. And so over time, we would let him out a little longer. And eventually, this is not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, we also got a GPS collar. So a GPS collar that is like real-time GPS. So I'd be able to see him where he went. And sometimes I'd are you serious? Why are you going up there or down there or over there when you could just be on the hillside right in our house? But he loved to just go and explore. And he also loved to visit. I had some neighbors tell me that he used to go on their go to their window when they, especially neighbors who had cats who were indoors. He would go to their window and he would knock and be like, "Hi, I just wanted to say hi to your cat." That's what he would do. That's what he would do. So for the most part, he would just go, come back. And when he came back, I would put him inside. Now, I am not going to lie to you and say that, oh, I was fine with it. It was totally fine. I would panic every time. I wouldn't say panic, but I would always I would be very mindful that Charlie was out and about. And so I'd be sitting, reading, working, being outside with Michko, and then shake the treats every so often. Every 10 minutes, I would just shake the treats. So he would come back, usually within an hour, and then I would bring him inside, and that was it. And he was fine. He would kind of go sleep, and be fine with it. Although it did make me sad because I was outside still, and Charlie loved being outside. But I noticed that if I let him stay out after he came back, he would stay out longer. So I just panicked too much. There was one time I panicked so much that neighbors were I had them looking for Charlie all around the street and up the hill and all the things. He was fine. He came back and he was fine. He was incredibly intelligent and intuitive and resilient and brave and funny and social and loved to party. He loved to party. He loved to party. Some of the last photos I have of him are from our Halloween party, David's birthday party we usually have in October. David's birthday falls just a couple days before Halloween. And he's in the center of the party. He just loved to be with people. He was naughty. He would want to eat what you were eating. he was really food motivated. I think that came from the fact that they probably starved him when he was being used as a mouser. That's usually what's done when people keep cats for mousing. They, keep their food intake low so that they're inspired and, incentivized to hunt. So that was the good thing from his early trauma, is that he was so food motivated. That's why he would come very easily and very quickly when I shook treats. The thing is, we live so far up the hill, like he wouldn't necessarily hear the treats when he was on the street, but he would for the most part. And I would call him, I would whistle, and he would come back. But when we had a party, we'd have to like be mindful where he was, because he would jump up on the table because he loved tortilla chips. He loved chips. He loved salt. He loved salt. So he would be naughty. He would be. There would be times I'd be like, Charlie, you're so naughty. But I loved him because I thought he was perfect. Even though he was naughty, he was my shadow. He never left my side. He would wait in the morning after his breakfast, and he would wait for me to sit down, because I have my whole ritual in the morning, whether I work out first or sit down and have tea, or I have tea first and I work out, if I go outside or I have tea inside. My morning was like, it really was dictated by how Charlie was. If he was relaxed, I'd be like, all right, I'm going outside because I want to go outside. But if Charlie just sat there and waited for me, which most of the time he did, I'd be like, all right, fine, I'm staying inside and I'll have my tea inside. And he would sit down on my lap. It was just the ritual. I mean, often I would be inside, especially in the winter, it was cold outside in the morning. And our ritual every morning was me going on the sofa, putting one of the blankets on, Charlie coming on my lap, Schuster, I said Schuster, Michko coming on my lap, and me having to navigate the two of them because they liked each other, but they didn't love each other. Well, I think they loved each other, but they had communication issues. That's how I always characterize it, because when Charlie would try to consume Michko right away, she'd be like, no, that ain't gonna happen. No. And she'd kind of give him a smack, and there would sometimes be a tussle, not like a full out wrestling, but like a smack and a walk away and a hiss. And so when the two of them would want to be on my lap, I would have to be like, okay, you have your time to make your biscuits here. You have your time to make your biscuits here. If you don't know what that means when cats knead, they like do the little kneading, like they're kneading biscuits, like they're kneading dough on the blanket or something. That's what they would both do. And I'd have to put my arm out to be like, all right, you do it here, you do it here. And then they would both settle down and they would be fine right next to each other. But sometimes there'd be miscommunication. So he was just there all the time with me. And then after I would get up, and I call it being catrophied because I would stay longer sometimes than I could or wanted to or needed to, because I would just not want to disturb them because I was catrophied, and then my legs would be numb and I couldn't get up. So I would finally get up and then go about, my morning showering, working out or whatever, and then coming to my desk. And he would often just be sleeping somewhere else, but often he would come and he wants to sit on my lap while I'm working. And then for hours during the day, he would be sleeping. And then when it was lunchtime, 1:00 or so, they knew it was time for them to be able to come outside with me. So our house is very routine oriented and just lots of rituals. And he was just there. He was just present. He was just there at night. We go watch a movie or read in the living room. He was there on my lap with Michko as well. I mean, she was there as well. And Charlie he was there. David would kind of have a joke. The saying in our house was like, where I am, there they are, because it's Michko as well. But David would always be like, he'd come into a room and I'd be there and Charlie, I'm leaving this. I'm not re-recording that because I want you to hear how much I keep saying Simon. Charlie would be on my lap and David would walk in the room. He'd go, hey, there's Charlie. Like that was just the thing. Hey, there's Charlie. Because like he was with me all the time. So our home is tremendously altered without him in it. And his absence is painfully acute. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's just so hard. Because his absence is so present. It's just so present. And, he was with us for about 15 years, right? And that's obviously also, I loved him deeply and I loved him long. So one of the things that was has been so hard also is that I talked for so long to David, to other people, friends, that I was so grateful that Charlie and Michiko had no health issues, had virtually no health issues. Schuster had Addison's disease. Simon had IBS. Simon also had fibrosarcoma. You might remember we had radiation for Simon because of the fibrosarcoma. Simon also had some like urinary tract issues. Simon and Schuster had crystals when I brought a kitten home. This is now this is now 25, 30 years ago, but that was an issue. So Simon always had like urinary tract issues that we had to keep, he had to get catheterized a few times. Like they had issues, both of them. Schuster eventually got diabetes. Charlie and Michiko had nothing. Charlie had like a minor allergy that he would get in the fall. Every October, early November, he would just kind of like, his ears would like be like a little, he would get like a rash. We never knew what it was, but every single fall, he would get this rash. And it was like clockwork. And so eventually we just knew it. We would kind of preemptively get Apoquel, and that would just, quell it eventually, and he'd be fine. But if he scratched those little itchies, they would scab and bleed, and it was uncomfortable and not great. So I just said for all those years, for 15 years, there were no issues. Like, hairballs sometimes, some vomiting here and there, but no issues. They were just really healthy. Now I would always bring them in for their annual exams. We would get their blood work done. Michiko hasn't had any health issues. She is overweight. I'll get to that because there's been some silver linings in all of this, but no, like nothing. So in 2023, this is where it's going to start to get hard. It was time for his annual exam, but I also brought him in specifically because I noticed that he had some increased vomiting. Hadn't lost weight, was still eating normally, and still urinating in his box, still defecating in his box. Like everything was normal, but I did notice some more vomiting. Now, when you have more than one cat, it's a little hard because you're like, is that a hairball? Are you sick? Are you okay? And I'm so on top of my cats. Like I can tell in a second if something's wrong. I can tell in a second if one of them's missing because I know their behavior so well. And where are they? Oh, they're locked in a closet. Well, it doesn't happen often, but like, if they're not doing what is the normal behavior, if I don't see them, I am on it. And so I remember feeling like he's vomiting more, but is it Michiko? Was that him? Because sometimes I didn't see them vomit. I would just find the vomit. So I wasn't certain. So it was time for his annual exam anyway. So it was like, yeah, let's do the full blood work, full blood panel. Let's see how he is. Now this is 2023. So he's like, 13? And so now officially he's senior and, we want to kind of watch and make sure everything's okay. But his weight was fine and he was eating well. So, and Charlie's always been like really lean and really svelte, and which was really weird because like he would eat Michiko's food. That was one of the things that annoyed her. And she's been overweight, but he was like always really thin, like normal thin, like good thin, always really svelte. So I got the numbers back I talked to the vet and she said his numbers looked good. I was always worried about kidney issues. So she said his kidney numbers look good. She's like, there's one number. She's like, he's not in pre-kidney disease or anything like that, but there's one number. Let's just kind of watch. We can give him some kind of like enzymes for his kidney disease. And, this is a vet practice that's been complementary. So they do both holistic as well as conventional medicine. And so she's like, yeah, we can give him some of this for his kidneys, but he's fine. Otherwise, we'll just keep an eye on things. We can always retest in a couple months, but he looks fine there. As far as like the vomiting, it seems like there's one of his numbers that's off, and that could be causing some gastrointestinal distress. So why don't we give him some digestive enzymes, and then that should be fine. And I was like, okay, so that sounds great. Really glad to know about that. But all right. So we got him the enzymes, and I would put it in his food. And yeah, okay, is it helping? Is he vomiting less? Sure, maybe, yes. Like it wasn't so clear that he was vomiting so often that I could see a big difference when I gave him the enzymes. And so I thought, I don't know, I didn't continue doing the enzymes, but he was fine. Like he was okay. So that was 2023. Now, this vet at this point, I should say, we were still going to the same practice. You may have heard me say Dr. Jenny before. Dr. Jenny Taylor is the founder of this vet practice called Creature Comfort in Oakland. And we went to Dr. Jenny at a time when she basically saved my cat Simon's life, because the vet we were going to when Simon got fibrosarcoma was when we kind of first moved to California. She had given him a vaccine, this other vet, and I did not want my cats to be vaccinated against rabies. They were both indoor cats for the most part. Simon and Schuster were essentially indoor cats, and they were only in the yard with me, as I said. And she vaccinated him anyway. And I'm not against vaccines, just I want to make that super clear. But for something like a rabies vaccine, where like they weren't catching mice and like at risk for rats or whatever, at risk for rabies, I didn't, I was being just kind of thoughtful about when I chose to give them a vaccine. And so long story short, fibrosarcoma it's a very aggressive cancer that develops in the connective tissue, and it's also called vaccine-associated sarcoma. It's rare, but what happens is the tumors develop at the site of the vaccination, where it was injected, and it doesn't metastasize. This cancer doesn't metastasize, but the tumor grows very quickly and very aggressively, and it could impact organs around it, and it's not good. And so now one of the things that's recommended is that I shouldn't say now, for a long time, it's been recommended that veterinarians inject in locations like limbs or like lower limbs or tails where the tumors are more easily removed. And of course, monitoring any post-vaccine lumps. And so I tell this whole story in another episode. So the point is, he wound up getting a tumor, and the vet that gave him the vaccine was horrible. And so we left her and found Dr. Jenny Taylor at Creature Comfort. And long story short, she saved his life. He had massive surgery, debulking. We could not amputate his leg because the freaking vet injected him way too high up on his hip. So we couldn't amputate it, and it was just too close to his hip. We weren't sure if it was going to come back again, even after amputation. So we did massive surgery, radiation, and he lived with that for 6 or 7 more years. Fibrosarcoma did not kill him. He died of like gastrointestinal issues. So we stayed with Dr. Jenny for years, and she was still at the practice. Eventually, I think she had some health issues and she left the practice. And so we continued to go to see other vets. And I never loved the other vets we went to. I liked them, but I was like, I'm never going to feel about another vet the way I felt about Dr. Jenny. So I just kept going there was Dr. Williams, Dr. Jenny, Dr. Johnson, and I kept going to Dr. Johnson. I always confused the two, and I didn't love Dr. Johnson, but I'd be like, oh, I guess I'm seeing Dr. Johnson, because I thought it was Dr. Williams. And eventually I was just like, all right, there's no real issue here with the cats, and so it's fine. We're just doing kind of regular checkups, and it's fine. So, okay, Charlie's a senior. We want to bring him back for his blood work year after the 2023 blood work that showed like everything was kind of fine, except for maybe some digestive issues. Fine. So was he vomiting a lot now? No, not really. Like same thing. He was eating fine. He wasn't losing weight. But I mean, again, the vomit, there was still vomit, but it wasn't like anything excessive. And Michka was having a lot of hairballs. And I was like, is that Charlie's vomit? Again, this wasn't daily, so it wasn't like a huge concern, but this was more like, let's bring him in. I want him to get his annual. He must have been vomiting a little bit, because I do remember talking to her about that. But he checked out. Everything checked out. She did all of the, palpating and like all the things. And then we did the blood work. So she called with the blood work and she said, one of the numbers is really concerning. And we don't do, we can't do ultrasounds here. So I would recommend that you get him to another vet to get an ultrasound. And I was like, okay, but she wasn't like super urgent about it. It was like, like one of his numbers is concerning and like, we should just get it checked. We should do further testing. And I was really grateful that it wasn't kidney issues, because at 15, like that could be a concern. But I remember doing a video on social media because Charlie was on my lap when I made this video. And I remember saying something like, this could be his pancreas, but I'm really grateful it's not his kidneys. And I remember a couple people who follow me on Instagram wrote to me privately and said, that's really tough. I'm so sorry. Keep us posted. And I was like, what do you mean that's tough? Like, I'm so glad it's not kidney. I was so naive. I knew nothing about pancreatitis because we had never had to deal with it. I knew pancreatitis was a serious thing, especially pancreatic cancer in people and in animals. Like I knew pancreatic cancer was like a horribly painful, really difficult. But I didn't know, like just having pancreas numbers that were higher, that was an issue. And so when I look back, I do look back and think, he must have been exhibiting behavior that made me feel like he wasn't well, but hindsight is 2020. And, I look back now and I don't think he was in pain, but I do look back and think, he was a bit more clingy with me. And I think there was more vomiting, and I think he was more clingy. I think he wasn't feeling well for probably months, but not in any way that was so obvious to me. Nothing that was any kind of emergency, I should say. I think he was probably in some discomfort, but I don't think it was pain. And this is one of the things that's really difficult about cats and dogs. They hide their discomfort so well. So of course, when I look back, I go, oh my God, I missed signs. And that's the stuff I have to forgive myself for. But honestly, it wasn't anything super obvious. So right away, we put him on anti-nausea medication because he must have at that point, like it was almost like when we got the blood work results back, it was almost like that's when Charlie like started looking like, well, you look like you're not feeling well. And maybe he wasn't eating that day or something. So we put him on anti-nausea medication. And I think she knew right away that like we needed to kind of get on this. So she gave me some vet names maybe, but I started looking around for those that would have ultrasound, be able to do ultrasound. And I remember getting an appointment for like several days away. Like, and I remember like calling her, I think saying something like, okay, so I remember saying like, okay, if we put him on the anti-nausea, so like, do we just check back in a couple weeks to see how that's doing? And she's like, no, you should get this checked out right away. But she wasn't so urgent that I really understood what I was dealing with. So I got the ultrasound with another vet for like Monday, which was like several days away. And I started doing more research and I realized I need to get this ultrasound sooner rather than later. So yeah, kind of crappy that like, I don't feel like Dr. Johnson in any way really, compelled me to do this. I now know how serious it was, and I don't really feel like she really communicated that. So we wound up going down to an oncologist in San Leandro that was actually the same oncology hospital that we went to when Simon had his radiation for his fibrosarcoma. And I remember having a really positive experience with them. So, because we had to bring Simon in like several times a week to get his radiation, and they were just really wonderful. So I made the appointment for like the next day to get an ultrasound. And the vet I started working with there, Dr. Wang, she was incredibly compassionate. And we did an ultrasound. And indeed, it showed that he had a mass near his pancreas and that his digestive tract looked really swollen. And she couldn't tell if it was officially pancreatitis, but she figured it was. And she was basically saying that even the mass, like it was hard to know if the mass was causing the pain or the pancreatitis or the inflamed gastrointestinal tract. But we needed to do more tests. And the blood work looked like confirmed what we knew from these numbers. But weirdly, it was like that day, it was almost like we gave him permission to just let go. I kind of remember this with my mother as well. Like once you can just be vulnerable, I think your body just kind of sinks into this, whatever it was. And so the day I took him down to this oncologist, Dr. Wang, and we were at this hospital, oh my God, he was like a different cat. He now really started exhibiting behaviors that indicated he was in great discomfort. And I swear to you, like prior to that day, I would not have said that he was sick. Like he just appeared normal. He ate. Like I said, he may have been vomiting a little bit more. And looking back, I think he was more clingy, but he wasn't despondent. He wasn't uncomfortable. Cats go into this little loaf position when they're uncomfortable. He wasn't uncomfortable like that. He was eating. He was doing all the things. And so the day we brought him to the oncologist, he was on my lap. He was so uncomfortable and I could tell he was just in pain. So we decided to leave him there overnight and do more tests and do another kind of ultrasound that was going to enable us to see if we, to just keep doing more tests. And also at this point, Charlie wasn't eating. So we had him stay there overnight and he was put on IV fluids. He was put on an IV drip for the pain medication, the Serenia. And then he wasn't eating. And so the next day he still wasn't eating. And we had to determine whether or not we were going to put him on a feeding tube. And so this was also an awful day because this next day when we had to make this terrible decision, when Charlie was just declining very rapidly, it was also November 6th. And so the only silver lining of having to deal with the fact that the majority of the American people elected, again, a convicted felon who had inspired an insurrection just 4 years before, the only silver lining was that I wasn't paying attention to that because I was just focusing on my cat. So the only silver lining of Charlie's demise at that point was that I wasn't paying attention to the election. So at this point, I was, in very close contact with the oncologist, with Dr. Wang. And I said, I'm just really curious. Like, we haven't given him, any kind of steroid. And I know that from other people and the work that I'd been doing and the research that I'd been doing, is that might actually help him. And so I asked if it was like worth trying to do something like a steroid. And she said, let's try it. Let's try the steroids and we'll see if he eats. So between the anti-nausea, the steroids, he was giving an appetite stimulant. We gave it a couple more hours and they called me and they said he started eating on his own. So we did not have to make the awful decision about tube feeding him. And we got to the vet, David and I both went, and he was perky, he was eating, he was really food motivated. We knew it was the fluids, the nausea, the steroids, possibly, like all the things. We were just throwing everything at it. And we decided we'd be able to bring him home and continue doing all the things, including doing fluids at home. And so that's what we did. We brought him home. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to thank my VIP supporters over at Substack. So the entire process over at Substack is a little different than Patreon. So there are much fewer levels that you can join at, which makes it easy for you. But it's shifted things for me. And so I have a few founding subscribers, we call them, or VIP subscribers. And I'm really grateful to them because they have chosen to contribute at a level that's higher than the regular annual. And there are perks for that aren't on the regular subscription. And so one of the perks they get at the VIP level is a one-on-one with me. And I'm just really grateful to these, in this case, they're all women. Lydia Houston, I met, I think 15 years ago in, I believe it was Michigan or Wisconsin. Oh my gosh. But it was at a veg fest I was speaking at many, many, many years ago. And Lydia has just been there on the kind of the periphery of my work for so long. I haven't seen her in so long. We don't have a lot of contact, but thank you, Lydia, for your just constant support. Brooke Boussard, if you've been hearing me thank my top supporters over the years, you've heard Brooke's name. I just had a one-on-one with Brooke and she's just amazing. I've already talked about her. She's an author as well. Go check out her book, Chew on This. So thank you so much, Brooke, for your support. Jillian Palicho, who we also had a one-on-one recently. She has been wonderful and just really active on Substack. And I just really appreciate, she told me something in our one-on-one that was so moving that, you know, with the full life that she has with the children and her business and just running her life, she would be overwhelmed by all of the different emails to read by anybody. But she includes me as one of the people whose emails she gets, and she just wants to hear what I have to say. So reads my Substack posts, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you, Jillian. And Monica Kirchner, who I have traveled with now on several trips. She and her husband, Kevin, have come to Alsace with us, to Japan. They're already scheduled for Northern Italy 26, and they're already scheduled for Galapagos 26. And they've also been to Kilimanjaro with Bridie and Seb at World Vegan Travel. And I just am so grateful to Monica for her support. So I wanted to just give a shout out to my VIP supporters. You can be a supporter as well over at Substack, where you get so much bang for your buck. So you can choose a $10 a month, or you can choose a $100 a year, or you can choose the VIP, which is $350 a year. So it's still lower than what the highest was over at Patreon. And as I've shifted over, obviously I've lost some supporters, and it is what it is. But I was very happy to do this transition, and thank you for coming over to Substack with me. But I want to give you a little nudge and really encourage you to become a subscriber. You could be a free subscriber, totally fine. Happy to have you there as well as a free subscriber, because the most important thing is that the information that I hope is inspiring for you gets out into the world, really shareable over at Substack. So go check it out. You can find the Substack at joyfulvegan.com. Everywhere I've linked now to Substack. So just look for me on Substack. You can also just search for Compassion in Action. Let me continue with Charlie's story. So we brought Charlie home, and, I put a video out on Instagram the night we had him home. He was so energetic. He was obviously with me. He was on my lap. I had gotten some toys for him when we went to the vet, because we knew we were going to be shifting his food. So we went and got new food for him for pancreatic, just kind of basically pancreatitis. Like, we knew this was going to be a whole new world for us. I also got him a catnip toy that it's called Greenfish, but we call it as pickle. We just call it a pickle because it's green, and just pickle's a better word than greenfish. I don't know why it's a greenfish. Plus, ew. So, because if a fish is green, no. So he was playing with his pickle, which sounds weird. Okay, but you know what I mean? He was playing with his new catnip toy, his pickle, and he was just energetic. And we went to bed, and I was constantly watching him, but I was feeling really good. We knew at that point that surgery wasn't going to be an option for him to remove that mass. We couldn't tell if the mass was causing the pain or if it was all the things I mentioned before. And so Dr. Wang we wanted to just really get him stable. That's where we were at this point. We knew the prognosis was kind of iffy, but I was very hopeful, and I was already now starting to become, pretty well versed in what pancreatitis was, talking to friends. Turns out I had friends who had cats who had pancreatitis, and I was becoming just kind of more knowledgeable about it. So this was all moving very quickly. And I knew that the ultrasound did not show great things, but I was still really hopeful. I can definitely say that I did not think at this point it was fatal. Not yet. So early Thursday morning, it was like 1 a.m. This is now November 7th. I checked on Charlie. I found him peacefully sleeping on the love seat in the living room. And by 5:30 a.m., I started him on his meds, and he took them. He wasn't initially interested in food beyond a few treats, but he eventually ate more when, gave him more of the appetite stimulant. And he ate again, in the evening. And so I was feeling really good. He had some little smelly kind of gas, so I assumed it was part of his ongoing GI issues. And so otherwise, he was making biscuits. He wanted to go outside. He was following me around. And I was really encouraged by that. So that was a Thursday. And I checked in with Dr. Wang that afternoon. I told her what I was seeing. I told her I was really helpful by all the signs and that it did appear that he was feeling really good. By the way, hadn't even heard from our vet. Our vet never even reached out to see how he was doing. I was quite shocked by that. I mean, just disappointed. And yeah, but Dr. Wang already was becoming someone I was talking with now. We saw her on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, talking to her on Thursday. And she said she was going to be away for the weekend and that she'd be checking in again on Monday. And I remember her saying, like, we're just going to hope he's going to have a good weekend. He's going to stay really strong. And we're not going to have any issues over the weekend because I won't be back until Monday. I think it was a holiday weekend. It was Veterans Day or something. So that was late Thursday afternoon and we felt really good. By early Friday morning, it was clear that he had crashed or definitely declined. Something was going on. He was clearly uncomfortable and probably in pain. He was scrunched up and he was uninterested in food. So I gave him his Preds, gave him his Serenia, the pain meds, and the Preds with the steroids. And I was just waiting for them to kick in. Like, he was great the night before. Like, I can't even, like, the change was just so acute. So by mid-morning, he was scrunched up and I was contacting the vet. Obviously, I was talking to vet techs there, even though Dr. Wang wasn't there. And my very good friend Megan came over because I wanted to give him fluids and I needed her to teach me how to do it. Frankly, I needed her to do it in all my years fostering cats and volunteering with cats and doing kitty cuddling and having cats. The thing I always said I wasn't good at was fluids. I was able to give Schuster his insulin shot. I was able to heal wounds. I was able to look at stitches. Like, I'm not squeamish at all about any of that stuff. But giving fluids was something that I really struggled with because this needle is really large and to stick it under their skin and then you have to hold up the bag to just make sure you get the gravity. It's just something I just wasn't looking forward to doing. So Megan came over and Megan had been the director of Oakland Animal Services many years ago. This is before our friend Anne became director of Oakland Animal Services. So she had, many years of experience with animals and fluids and medication and that kind of thing. So we gave him his fluids and it was clear that he was in discomfort. He just wasn't feeling well. And so we gave him his fluids and we kept our fingers crossed that he was going to bounce back because we've really identified fluids as being something that would help him immensely. And we gave him his fluids in my office where I'm recording right now. And he urinated on the rug, which is, he'd never done anything like that. And he was clearly just feeling uncomfortable, distressed, annoyed, all the things. And so when he did that, that just made me so sad because I just knew that, like, this was just a sign that this was, he was doing things he'd never, ever done before. He'd never urinated outside the box, his litter box, other than being outside. So he was clearly in discomfort. And the whole intention at this point was to just hope that the fluids would kick in, which they usually kick in pretty quickly. So we were hoping he would bounce back. So he moved down himself to the den in a corner of the rug that he never really hung out in, but I went down there constantly and checked on him. He fell asleep for a time and his position changed and looked a little bit more relaxed. So my hope was that the fluids were making him feel a little better. He wasn't interested in food. I gave him his appetite stimulant. He wasn't interested in food. I gave him his pain meds, called the vet tech again. And by Friday evening, it was clear he was not well. So we decided to bring him to the emergency vet. So the oncology hospital where we were bringing him also has an emergency hospital. So it was good to bring him to the place where we had been, even though our oncologist wasn't there. And in fact, I don't think any oncologist was there. Most ERs don't have oncologists. So we brought him to the ER and we immediately, worked with the vet there to put him on fluids, pain meds, appetite, like all the things. And the hope was that by the next morning, Saturday morning, he would be stabilized and we'd be able to figure out things from there. So the next morning, was anxious all night, talked to the emergency vet who was going to be changing shifts soon. And she told me that he hadn't really turned around. There was really no difference in his demeanor and his behavior. He wasn't eating. So we made the decision to not tube feed him at that point. What we wanted to do was bring him to an ER that had an oncologist, and that was an emergency room down in Palo Alto. So that was the good thing, was that there'd be oncologists right there on site at the emergency room. Because again, there were no oncologists at the ER in San Leandro, which is not atypical. And our vet was, she was away. So we picked him up from the vet in the ER in San Leandro, and we put him in his little carry case. And I was in the back seat with him the whole time. And I had the cage door open because he was pretty despondent. He wasn't really active, so he wasn't going to leave the carry case. And he was still connected to some pain drip. And he just rested his head on my hand. He knew I was there, and he always did whenever he was on my lap. I mean, I could just be sitting next to him and put my hand out, and he would put his head on my hand. So he did that, and that made me happy, but it also made me very sad. We got to Palo Alto about an hour later, and we checked in, and of course we're in the waiting room for a bit. And at that point, I think he was brought into a room to just weigh him, but also determine if he was in need for triage, or if he was stable enough to just wait until the oncologist could see him. And so he was in a different room, and I started looking at my phone to gather medical records from all the different places, because now we had our original vet, the oncologist in San Leandro, the emergency room in San Leandro, and I wanted to give the ER everything we had here in Palo Alto, especially assuming that we were going to be doing some treatment here, and I wanted to just be able to have everything in one place. And that's when I looked at his records that were sent over from our regular vet, from Dr. Johnson, and that's when I saw his blood work from 2023. And there was a note from the lab who had done his blood work, and it said that there was a concern about the numbers that usually indicate pancreatitis, and that the number was a concern, and that if there were clinical signs, and remember there were, because I took him in because of the vomiting, to do further testing. And if there were no clinical signs, to just retest, because the numbers were concerning. And my stomach dropped. I was gutted and stunned, because I had taken him in 2023 because of vomiting, to get his blood work done, to see if anything was going on, as you remember. And Dr. Johnson, who had called me at that time, said, no, there were some numbers that were slightly concerning, but let's just put him on digestive enzymes. And I trusted her. I never looked at the blood work myself, which is definitely something I will never, ever, ever do again. I will always look at the blood work myself. Even though you pay the vet to trust that they interpret blood work, I will never take that chance again. Lessons and gifts. I will always look at the blood work myself and ask questions, and certainly get another opinion. So I saw that note. The lab said these numbers are concerning, and it was in red. like the numbers that were concerning, like any blood work for us too, the numbers that are concerning show up in a different color, and there's a note and an asterisk, and it says the numbers are concerning. So, do the next thing. And she never told me about these numbers. He had a tummy issue. He had been vomiting. She gave me a digestive enzyme. And I never took this, I never did more than that. I never did more. I never knew that it could have been something like pancreatitis. I never knew it could have been a mass. I didn't know. Now, the outcome could have very well been the same, but I would have done more if I had been given the opportunity to do more. So needless to say, I was pretty devastated, and I was really angry. Still am. Sad. And I couldn't do anything right at that moment. So finally it was our time to go in to meet with the oncologist on site. And he said that they were setting up Charlie with fluids and all the things, and that he would do an ultrasound tonight and check him throughout the night. And then the next morning they would do more tests. And one of the things I mentioned when I mentioned about how we were feeling good with Dr. Wang about what we saw in the blood work, one of the things Dr. Wang said that made her feel hopeful was that she saw the mass on his pancreas, but that she was really glad she didn't see any pancreas enzymes going into his abdomen. Now, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anything about that. I obviously learned. So when we left Charlie at the ER, I remember this vet also said the same thing. And so we left him there to be there overnight, to just rest, to be on fluids. And we drove back home. It's about an hour from our house. And this was late Saturday afternoon. We walk in the door after leaving him there. We were exhausted. We were sad, stressed. I saw this thing that I'm now obsessing over because I don't understand how I never knew about that. And that's when my phone rang, pretty much just walking in the door. And it was the oncologist we had just seen. And he said that he did an ultrasound and a quick blood test. And he was able to see the mass was definitely there. But the thing that was most concerning was that indeed there were pancreas digestive enzymes leaking into his abdomen. Now, I learned that normally these enzymes obviously would be released into the intestines to help digest food, but they can become prematurely activated and leak into surrounding abdominal tissues, which cause inflammation and pain and potential damage to nearby organs. And while this leakage doesn't mean cancer, severe chronic inflammation can mean cancer, and it can complicate diagnosis. And in rare cases, there are concerns about pancreatic carcinoma. And of course, there were in this case concerns because he'd already had symptoms of pancreatitis and he had a mass on his pancreas. So I asked the vet if cancer was suspected, and he said further diagnostics would be needed. Like, we wouldn't know unless we did a biopsy and further imaging. And we couldn't know, but everything was pointing to it wasn't good. He hadn't changed. He hadn't recovered. He was still just lethargic and clearly in pain. And even with the pain drip, he was clearly uncomfortable. So we were left with a choice at that moment. I wanted to know if I could do more. We wouldn't be able to do a biopsy until he was better, until he was feeling better. We weren't going to put him through that. And the idea of putting him through a biopsy, which would have meant stress and distress and discomfort and more pain, to determine what we already knew, that he had pancreatitis and that he had a mass and possibly pancreatic cancer at that point. So I had to ask, because I was obviously wary of putting him through anything that was going to cause more pain, but I had to ask, what was the prognosis if we did a biopsy and it found cancer? And of course, at that point, we'd have to work with an oncologist and figure out what the treatment plan was, but it was most likely chemotherapy and radiation. And was I going to now wait to put him through a biopsy? And then if that, the prognosis wasn't good, it was clear at that point that he was not going to get better, and we didn't want to put him through any more discomfort and pain. So I asked the oncologist his opinion based on what he was seeing, and he said that he felt like he was in a lot of pain right now, and they could keep him comfortable with pain medication. But that was really all they could do. He wasn't responding to anything. So I said I would talk to David because I wanted to make an informed decision with the help of my husband. And I got off the phone knowing that I wasn't going to be able to save him. So I knew we were going to go back to Palo Alto to release my cat from this world of pain and say goodbye to my beloved Charlie. And before we left, I gathered some of his favorite toys, one of his beds, clothing items that smelled like me. And what I knew for sure, the second we made this decision, was that we would be bringing his body back home. I chose to cremate Simon and Schuster and Cassandra. I wanted Charlie's body here at home with us in the ground he loved so much. Besides me, I don't know any other being who loves being outside more than Charlie. And he taught me to trust him with the freedom that he loved so much. But not so much freedom that he wouldn't come back to his mama. He came back every single time. And he was always well. He never got hurt. He never did anything. He got to have this life that he wanted, that he loved so much. He was tenacious of life. But that was no longer to be. So we arrived and we were immediately ushered into a quiet room with chairs and a large ottoman. And we went through the logistics and the payment with the vet tech, which was really helpful because we could just focus on Charlie and then leave when we were done and not have to go to the counter and, pay for his euthanasia. So they brought my little man into me. And by the way, that's what we used to call Charlie. We used to call him little man. We used to call him monkey man. We used to call him mama's boy. But my little man was hooked up to IVs that were administering fluids and pain meds. So he was pretty well drugged up, but he was alert, still there. It was really hard because his eyes were very wide open. They were dilated and from the pain drugs. And that was hard to have his eyes be so wide open, but he was drugged up. So he was wrapped. We had a towel wrapped around him and he was able to sit comfortably on my lap for a bit, but he really had, kind of the IV all over. And I moved him to the ottoman and I just pushed in as close to him as I could so I could feel him and so that he could feel me. And indeed, I put my hand down and he rested his head on my hands. He always had to touch me. He always had to be connected with me. And he was again now. So we spoke to him and we talked to him and we soothed him and we told him how much we loved him. And it was really hard. So when we knew that we didn't want to prolong this, we called the vet in who administered first the sedative and then the euthanasia solution all through the IV, and he was gone. So we stayed a little longer, and really I just wanted to bring him home. I just wanted to get him home. And as strongly as I felt about burying his body and not cremating him, I felt just as strongly about having Michiko see his body. I remember when we euthanized Simon, Schuster was in the room with us the whole time and stayed with his body all night after we said goodbye to Simon. So we brought Charlie into the house and immediately brought out a large cooler and filled it with ice. We knew he would be with us all night because it was already dark now and we weren't going to bury him until the next morning, till Sunday morning. So we gently placed him in the cooler on a blanket. And prior to that, I had brought Charlie up to where Michiko was in our bedroom. And when she saw him, I don't think she quite saw him or understood, she jumped down off the chair right away and she walked away. So I decided that she needed to see Charlie on her own. And I didn't know when that was going to happen. So I placed the cooler with Charlie in it in the foyer, basically between our living room, dining room, kitchen, stairwell. So she'd be able to see him wherever she went on that floor. And it didn't take long before I was in the living room and I watched her walk over to Charlie, smell him, look at me, smell him again. And she walked away. And after that, she never went to him again. And I knew she had said her goodbye. And I was so glad to give her that closure. So we kept him on ice overnight. And the next morning, we brought Charlie outside where he loved being so much. And we decided on the perfect spot for him. There's an area of our back garden, you're hearing me talk all about the native plantings I'm doing, the rewilding I'm doing here. And, we've been landscaping this place for years. But there's one area that we haven't quote unquote landscaped. Not that a property has to be landscaped everywhere, but the point is it is an area where I've been wanting to for years put in native trees and shrubs and ground cover and flowers. Also remove the ivy. There had been ivy there, this awful, awful invasive English ivy for years and years since we moved in. I mean, there was ivy all around this house when we first moved in. Most of it's gone. That's the last of the invasive English ivy. It was on this hillside all the way in the back part of our backyard. And I've been slowly getting rid of it, but I knew that's where Charlie would be buried. And I am now so excited. I'm going to do it in the fall of this year, 2025. To beautify this spot and make it properly his memorial. It's a really beautiful place. It's a beautiful space. And for years when it was ivy, I can't tell you how often Charlie would sit and look at that spot and sometimes pounce into it, looking for the only animal who really thrives in such an environment, and those are rats. And so he never caught any rats, but he would stare into that ivy, sometimes 30 minutes at a time. So David and I grabbed shovels and we started digging into what we call now Charlie's playground. When Simon died and when we were having our vigil for him, we played a Beethoven piece. It's a string quartet in A minor. And I remember asking David, I actually remember telling you this. David just picked the piece and it was this beautiful, beautiful piece. And I asked him why. And he said, Simon was just so full of life and beauty. And he wanted to just remember him through this piece of music that reminded David of life and beauty. When Schuster died, we played Arvo Part, Spiegel and Spiegel. If you've ever listened to it, it's a very, very sad piece. And in both cases, I couldn't listen to those pieces of music for years because that was their association. And I always loved Arvo Part and Spiegel is just a beautiful piece. It's very, very sad. And also Schuster's death had so much sadness around it because Michael had just died. And I just felt like, I was not able to spend the time with Schuster that I really would have wanted to because I was back and forth with Michael, who was, dying. And so when we were burying Charlie, we played a song. Not going to be able to get through this without crying. That was Charlie's song from the beginning, from when I first met him. So I told you I used to run in this neighborhood and I had, my playlist, right? And the last couple songs of my playlist were the cool down pieces, like, because I would have obviously pieces that would, I'd be faster and I'd be running, but I had a couple cool down pieces. And one of the songs is in that cool down piece. So it was the very end of my run. I would always hear when I met Charlie because I would be finishing my run and finishing at that bottom of the hill where I would go and see him and spend some time with him before I went home. This is obviously before we took him home. So the song is by The Frames and it's called Falling Slowly. And there was one day when I was going back home, back up the hill, and he was following me. And this is before we took him home. And he was following me up and, it happens. You meet cats and they follow you a little bit. You're like, no, don't come. Like, don't follow me. I don't want you to follow me home. Not because I didn't want him home, just because I didn't want him to go farther away from his home. And so I was like, I kept stopping and looking back and he just kept stopping when I would stop. And then he would follow me. And finally, I was like, no, Charlie, you can't come. You have to go back home. Go back home. Go be safe. And I looked back and he was just sitting there, like looking at me like, why can't I come with you? And the line in that song is, I don't know you, but I want you all the more for that. And I did want him. And I did get him. And I got to spend almost 15 years with that little man. So we played that song over and over while we dug his grave and prepared for his burial. I still can't listen to that song. I mean, it's only been 6 months, but I can't listen. And I have a playlist on my Spotify that's like liked songs. And that's one of the songs that was on my liked songs. Can't listen. So for like months, I would have my liked songs playlist on. And I knew the song that came just before Falling Slowly. And I would always go, no. Like, my phone would be in my pocket. I'd be gardening. It would be muddy. And I would have to get my phone and fast forward. I don't want to hear that song. And now I finally just removed it from my liked list so that I don't have to, hear it without, wanting to hear it. I didn't want to be surprised by it. So someday I will add that to my playlist again, but today is not that day. And so we were preparing the grave and we were gathering his toys. And a few things struck me. Number one, I didn't want him to be alone. I still had, of course, the ashes of Simon and Schuster and Cassandra, all of whom were in their little cedar boxes with their names on them. And I knew they needed to be buried with Charlie. He had touched all of them. I mean, Simon wasn't with us by the time Charlie came, but Charlie was able to come to our home because we had space after he died. And of course, he was with Schuster for the last year of his life. And of course, he was with Cassandra for that short time before she went into kidney failure. But they all belonged with him. So that was something I knew very strongly. I also knew that I would bury him wrapped in my robe. I used to call my robe Charlie's girlfriend because he would always sit on it, mostly because I was in it, and then he would be sitting on me. But even when I wasn't in the robe, I would lay it down for him to sit in, and he would always lay on it. And when I traveled and left him with sitters, I would always put my robe down because I knew he would sleep on it because it smelled like me, obviously, but he just loved that robe and he would make his biscuits on it. So it seemed really fitting to bury him in it. So we wrapped him in his girlfriend and we placed him in the ground and we surrounded him with the ashes of Simon and Schuster and Cassandra and some of his toys, and we buried him. And I was really worried about wild animals digging him up, even though we buried him like 3 feet down. It was a lot to dig. So we placed some really large stones on top of his grave. And he's been fine ever since. And it's been over 6 months and he's fine. I had already had a granite plaque I had made for Simon and Schuster when they died. So I got busy getting one for Charlie, which I love. I need to get one for Cassandra. I will say that is another part of the ritual that makes the healing process possible. Everything I'm doing in this episode for me and for you is to tell you that it's part of the healing process. I shared this when my mother died, that I couldn't give her a funeral because of COVID, and her ashes appeared one day on my steps in a box, and friends couldn't come, and family couldn't come, and I couldn't go there, and it just really changed the way I was able to grieve. And so all of this that I'm doing for Charlie is for me, it's for you, it's for Charlie. And so, putting the photo album together, choosing the photos, choosing the photo for his granite plaque, what I would write on it, sharing his story here, sharing his story on social media initially, not letting more time pass before doing so. It's one of the reasons I needed to just push through this and do it. I didn't want a year to go by without telling his story. So all of this is part of the ritual. Some people get ashes and put them in, a charm and wear on their neck. Actually, I remember when I met Monica in Japan. Well, I had met her before, but when I saw her again in Japan, she was wearing one of her animal's ashes. Could be getting, their footprint. I mean, there's so many things we can do to just create memorials. That's what memorials are. They're there for remembering. So I had the granite plaque made. I love it. I placed his collar with his heart-shaped tag that has his name on it on the top of the stone. It's been there ever since. And our winter rains came not long after that. And so the grave became overgrown with more ivy and more aggressive non-native grasses. This has been part of this whole rewilding process. Charlie's been part of this as well, because this is the area where I'm like slowly getting rid of all of these non-natives, where I've done it throughout the rest of our yard. That's the last place. And I can't wait to make this place beautiful for him and to just make Charlie's playground this just focal point. And I love seeing him there. It's so healing. I mean, I'm there all the time. I'm in the back all the time. I'm gardening, I'm sitting, I'm drinking wine, I'm like entertaining. He's back there. I love bringing friends over to see him. And of course, Simon and Schuster's plaque is there, and I'll get one for Cassandra. But it's Charlie's playground. And it means a lot to have him here at home. Even if you also just cremate and have them, or if you do something, even if you don't have their ashes, you can create some kind of memorial. Some people have written to me and said, I don't have their ashes. I didn't get them, or I didn't have them, or I lost them, or whatever. You can still create a memorial space. It doesn't have to be physically their body or their ashes. It can be anything. Create the ritual that is meaningful for you. Anything. It could be a stone that you bury. It could be, a toy, an old toy that you had. It could just be a picture of them. And that could be the memorial. And you could put a stone on it and you can make it the grave. And whether or not it's a grave, if it's just a place where you put this memorial or their ashes or what have you, just having a place to look to, something physical, I do think is healing. So how have things been since? Well, how am I? How is Michiko? I'm not mentioning David a lot here because David is just, he's my support. David misses Charlie. He doesn't feel the grief that I feel. And it doesn't mean he didn't love Charlie. It just means, he's just not me. And so for me, it's been rough. I miss him every day. I miss him every single day. As I said, his absence is so present. And the first time we had a party without him was a huge, like there's always these firsts, right? And they're really hard. Now on the flip side, I can eat my popcorn and I don't have to have anybody eat my popcorn when I just want to eat my popcorn. We had a party. We had our Christmas and he wasn't here. It was the first party we had where we didn't have to worry about Charlie jumping on the table, right? He doesn't eat Michiko's food. I mean, Michiko gets to eat her food without having to stop Charlie because he would do that constantly. We had to manage Charlie. We had to manage Charlie and Michiko. They were together for 14 years. They were fine, but I did have to manage them sometimes because Charlie would bother Michiko. And when we went away for the first time, I can't even tell you that I removed 3 pages of our instructions. I mean, essentially, it got cut down a lot because obviously just having 1 cat instead of 2 is easier, half the work. But also the things that I had to put in that instruction sheet, I don't have to say about Michiko. I don't have to talk about be careful of the door, be careful of the door, be careful of the door, watch the door. Make sure you close the windows because if they blow open, there's no screen on some of our windows, no screens. He'll jump out. Charlie's done it. He'll escape. Here's what you do if he escapes. Here's what you do if he gets on the table. Here's how to stop him from eating Michiko's food. All that was gone. And so honestly, just giving our instructions to our sitter when we were just in Japan, actually when we were in Rwanda also back in December, and then Japan, and now again leaving for France soon, and then Croatia in September. It's just so much easier, and she's kind of perfect. I know I said Schuster was flawless. So is Michiko. Some cats just are, and she's just perfectly perfect, whereas Charlie was imperfectly perfect. Michiko's perfectly perfect. He was perfect. He was just imperfectly perfect. She's perfect and she's just perfect. She's an angel. She doesn't do anything wrong. How is she doing? She is living her best life. She is filling in the spaces Charlie left empty. For me, for her, she's just mine. She's always been my shadow as well. She always was my shadow. But I had to navigate their sometimes tense relationships. So I always made sure that Michiko got as much love and attention, but Charlie dominated. So now that she's an only kitty, she gets me all the time. Whereas Charlie used to sit on me all the time. And so Michiko was near me. Charlie used to wait for me to sit down, especially in our morning time. Now Michiko does. She's with me constantly. And what's nice is that she gets to come outside with me and I don't have to stress about her being outside. And in the morning, where I used to feel bad, Michiko would come out with me in the morning because she wouldn't go anywhere. Charlie, I'd feel bad because he wanted to come out in the morning too, but I would keep him inside because I would just be afraid he would just go run more and have, just way more freedom than I wanted him to have. He got some freedom. I didn't want him to have all the freedom. So she can come outside with me in the morning. She actually comes out less. It's interesting. I feel like Charlie was kind of like her guardian in a way. So she comes out less, but she's coming out more and she can come out anytime. Sometimes I will literally pick her up and physically bring her outside. And sometimes she goes in earlier than she would have otherwise. And I think some of it is because there's a cat who comes around at night. And I think she feels intimidated by that cat. Different story. But the other silver lining is that because I don't have to navigate Charlie eating Michiko's food, and I think sometimes Michiko's stress ate, and I wonder if that is what contributed to her weight gain, because Charlie ate more and he ate her food, but he was always skinny. She would have to, kind of find her way to eat. I mean, I always made sure she ate. Obviously, she was eating. She had no problem eating. But the good thing is that now, navigating just one cat, it's hard to do with 2 cats. She's now on a weight loss food and she loves it. So I switched her food pretty much the day after Charlie died. And she's lost weight, which is really amazing. So I'm really, really, really grateful. for that, because she's turned 14. She just turned 14. And of course, I am incredibly protective of her, as I was with all my cats. But we had to go in for her annual exam and her blood work. And because she's on a prescription weight loss food, I couldn't get more food without bringing her back in for her annual checkup. That's just the rules most vets have, and I respect them. I think that's good. But now you can imagine what my dilemma was. I had reached out to Dr. Johnson once Charlie died, and I called the reception several times. I left messages. I sent an email, and I expressed my absolute horror at the fact that I was never told that Charlie's numbers in that blood work from 2023 indicated that it could be pancreatitis. I was disappointed. I never heard back from Dr. Jenny Taylor, who we knew for over 20 years. I mean, over 20 years, like 25. And even though she's not practicing, it's still her practice. And I'm really disappointed. I don't know if they were afraid that we were going to, of litigation or something, but I think that was pretty sad and unfortunate. Dr. Johnson did leave a message. She left one message. She got my voicemail and she left a message saying that she was really sorry to hear about Charlie. But if you remember, I gave him digestive enzymes because his numbers looked like it probably was contributing to his little tummy upset. So that's all she spoke to. She never spoke to the fact that indeed it specifically said from the lab that it could be pancreatitis, something she never told me. So I worked through this in different ways, and you would maybe work through this differently. This is what I did. And David was, I was leading the way. David would have supported whatever I did. We lost Charlie on Saturday, November 9th. On Monday, November 11th, Dr. Wang, the oncologist we worked with for just the last week of his life, called to see how Charlie was doing. Creature Comfort, no one had ever reached out. The only reason they called me back was because I left messages for them. No one called and said, how's he doing? I mean, my God, we'd gone to this vet for 25 years. So it was just shocking. But Dr. Wang, who knew Charlie for a week, called. As you remember, we spoke on Thursday the 7th, and she told me she was going to be away for the weekend and that she was really hopeful that Charlie would improve. So she didn't know anything when she called. And I said he had died, that we lost him on Saturday. And she was just devastated for us. And, she didn't see it coming so quickly, but she knew that it was really teetering when she saw him. We never stabilized him. And so when I told her what I learned about the blood test results from 2023 and the anger and the remorse I felt, feeling like I could have saved Charlie, she was so kind and so diplomatic and so professional, but incredibly compassionate. And she said, she was walking this line of like not wanting to throw our vet under the bus, like this is a colleague, right? But she said, absolutely, the vet should have told us, should have given me the opportunity to make a decision based on what the blood test results were. But she also said that mass was most likely growing for a long time and that there was probably nothing we were going to be able to do about it. And that it was pointing in this direction, specifically of pancreatic cancer. And of course, we can't predict the future and we can't undo the past. And we don't know what the outcome would have been. But I did find comfort in her words. I did find comfort in what she told me. I found no comfort in creature comfort. Comfort, that's ironic. I just noticed that there was no comfort from creature comfort. We had gone there for over 25 years. So Dr. Wang confirmed that indeed the pancreatitis was most likely pancreatic cancer at that point, and it would have been impossible to reverse that given how far along it appeared to be. And she knew that the decision we made was the most compassionate thing we could have done. So it was helpful to talk to her. And she said, call me anytime. And believe me, there were so many times I wanted to call her and I didn't, and I haven't, but I was so grateful to her. And right away, I got a condolence card from that practice from Dr. Wang. I also spent a lot of time processing this with my friend Megan, the one who came over to give him fluids. She, as I said, she had a lot of experience with animals and vets. And she She also understood that, look, number one, cats mask pain. So I can't look back and think, oh, you missed things. You missed the signals. Sure, maybe I missed a couple signals, but they are so good at masking pain. So that's number one. And, I have processed that. And number two, in the end, vets are clinicians. They're looking at all of the factors. They're looking at clinical signs. They're looking at blood work. They're looking at weight. They're looking at everything. And they're making a decision based on what they see. And a lab that's looking at blood work is looking at only one thing. So when Dr. Johnson saw that number and it said, and the lab said, take a look at this, they probably get labs all the time saying, okay, here's a red flag. But in the end, it's the vet's decision what to do with that. And she clearly looked at that number and didn't think it was so vital that she should tell me. Do I think that was negligent? Yes. Do I think that is worthy of a lawsuit? No. I'm not going to go through that. I'm not going to do that. Have I made it clear that I think this is negligent? Yes, I have sent letters and I've said my piece. Do I want to have a face-to-face call with Dr. Johnson or, conversation? No. Will I feel up for that someday? Maybe, but I don't feel up for it right now. I don't. So I haven't done that. So at this point, what I did was when I was able to really look at the numbers, I did look at the spec IPL range. So that's what these numbers are, the spec IPL. And those numbers aren't necessarily indicative of pancreatitis. It's usually indicative of some kind of gastrointestinal thing that pancreatitis could be related to. So it's not like, oh, the number that, there was a pancreas, like, like kidney numbers, like the kidney values, you look at that, you're like, that's kidney, right? This was like, it could be this, could be that. And so that's why she looked at those numbers and she went, that is what could be giving him stomach upsets. Let's get him some digestive enzymes. And when I look at the number, I talked about this in the blood work episode that I did for people. There's still different ways to read these numbers. The high end of the spec IPL range is 3.5. In 2020, he was 4.2. In 2023, he was 8.7. So yes, like 8.7 out of 3.5. She obviously looked at that number and made the call that it was probably digestive. And if I had still seen things, I would have obviously brought Charlie back, but I didn't see more clinical signs. Again, vomiting here and there, whatever, right? But it wasn't weight loss. There wasn't loss of appetite. All the things were still normal. So if I felt that was also something, and, I would have brought him back right away. She didn't feel like it was serious enough to say, let's test him again, or let's get him an ultrasound. This could be pancreatitis. She made that call. I now look back and go, you should have told me. Because in 2024, high end, remember, spec IPL is 3.5. In 2024, it was 50. And that's when she told me, you got to go to get this checked out. Go get an ultrasound. Now, I still don't think she was as urgent as she could have been, should have been. But nonetheless, she told me. So, in 2023, he was 8.7 out of 3.5. She made the call to not tell me. In 2024, he was 50, with 3.5 being the high end of the range. So one of the things that Megan and I talked about was just that idea of just like, she made the call. And I still think she should have told me. I still think she should have given me the opportunity. And I think that's where the negligence was, to be honest. But when I looked at the difference in those numbers, I went, okay, I could see why she made the call that she did, where she didn't think it was pancreatitis. I still think I should have known. So when it came to needing to go to get Michiko's annual exam, and I couldn't get her prescription medication until I did that, I was at a crossroads because I thought, well, I could still go to a different vet at Creature Comfort at the practice, go to Dr. Williams, go to another vet there. And, some part of me was like, it's just easier. Her records are there. The other part of me was like, I don't want to set foot in this place again. I just don't want to set foot in this place. And so I started asking around. I asked Cat Town and my very good friend Anne, who was the founder of Cat Town and who's now the executive director of Friends of Oakland Animal Services. She just cannot step away from trying to save our animals in Oakland. She's amazing. So I asked Anne, I asked Cat Town, who I volunteer with, and they told me about a vet they really liked. And so I reached out and made an appointment. And indeed, I made an appointment for Michiko to see a new vet. And so, with the decision that Dr. Johnson made, I'm telling you their names, and I don't usually name them because I want you to know, I don't think this was malpractice. I think it was a judgment decision that I don't agree with. And I can't litigate the past. We have to own the decisions we make. And I made the decision to not look at the blood work. You can say, well, but that's not what you do. Sure. Yes. And I didn't look at the blood work. I own that I stayed with a vet practice that I didn't love, but I just thought it's all good. It's good enough. Right. But I didn't think it was the best place. I mean, it wasn't bad. I just didn't love them the way I loved Dr. Taylor. And I thought, well, maybe that's too high a bar. But I own that. I have to own that. I have to own that I would get some things wrong, but I got most of it right. I have to own that as soon as I knew something was wrong, I got on it as quickly as possible. I own that I did the best I could for Charlie once I knew. David has said every day, and he said it every day when Charlie was alive, that Charlie hit the lottery when he met me. I hit the lottery. Charlie hit the lottery. And I can't regret all of that time and all of that love. And would I have liked more months and more years with him? Absolutely. My God, of course. We always do. Even if he lived 5 more years, I would have wanted 5 more years. But it is what it is. And I can't undo it. And sharing this with you is to also learn from my experience so that you maybe can avoid something like this, right? It was the same reason I told the whole story about Simon and his fibrosarcoma. Like, there's things to learn from other people's experiences. It's another reason we share these stories of our loved ones' life and death. Lessons and gifts. That's what we get. And so that's where I'm at. I brought Schuster. I keep doing this. I call Charlie Simon because their personalities are more similar. And I call Michiko Schuster. This has happened since Charlie died. It's weird. I've never made that mistake before. So we brought Michiko to her new vet. Loved their customer service from start to finish. They have been amazing so far. Their email correspondence, the front desk, the vet tech when we got there, the vet when we were there, even leaving, they were like, there's a door you can go out so you don't have to go back through the lobby because, some cats get stressed because there might be dogs out there or whatever. And I'm like, thank you. Like, everything really thoughtful. I'm already so happy. And the good news is that Michiko lost a pound, which is a lot. She has probably another pound and a half, 2 pounds to lose. And I actually feel really good that she has lost more. In a good way, like not in a bad way. She's quite voluptuous and and she's always been, but she needs to lose another pound. She's also always had like a little fatty lump on her shoulder. She's had it for years. We did an aspiration and we aspirated it and it was just fat, but I want to get rid of it. And so we are going to do her teeth cleaning. She needs a teeth cleaning and we are going to anesthetize her for that so that we can also remove her fatty lump. We joked that maybe she'll lose a little weight when we take the fatty lump off. She might lose a few ounces. You never know. The other thing that's been really amazing is she's doing really well. As I said, she's living her best life. But I want to tell you something really sweet and really sad and really special. So I told you that place that Megan and I gave Charlie his fluids in my office on the floor, on the rug where he was, one of his last places he was before we took him to the AR and never brought him home again, except for his body. Well, of course, we've cleaned that rug several times where he urinated. You can't smell any urine. We cleaned it. When Michiko comes into my office, and she comes in every day, she goes right to that spot where Charlie was. And she rolls around in that one spot. She meows and she purrs. she's like happy. And I feel like it's her homage to Charlie, and it's all good. She knows Charlie was there. She knows Charlie's still there. She can smell him even though I can't. And it's really amazing. It's only that one spot. I have so many beautiful photos of Charlie. And of course, it's been something I've been wanting to do. I've been wanting to frame his photo. I've also been thinking of having the photo painted. There's one photo in particular I love of him. But this photo is so beautiful of him that I just want it as the photo. And so I have it blown up. I'm looking at it right now. I haven't gotten it framed yet. I will shortly. But I haven't done it. I haven't done it yet. And so I may decide to have it painted. We have a portrait of Charlie. We have a portrait of Simon painted. One of my podcast listeners a long time ago, she painted a portrait as a surprise to me when Simon died. I still hold, it's still hanging it's hanging right in our foyer when you first walk in the door. I have a painted photo of Michiko, my friend Linda had painted for me from a photo. And I have a gorgeous photo of me and Schuster, didn't have painted. And I have this gorgeous photo of Charlie. And so I think I'm just going to keep it as a photo for now. And maybe someday I'll have it painted. The other thing that was really amazing was Sage is the hospital where Charlie died. They've reached out several times with information about grief. And one of the things they offer is Sage Grief Services. It's a support group as well. Like you can call to just do one-on-one, but then they also have a support group. I haven't taken advantage of it. I've thought about it a lot. Sometimes I feel like it's too late to reach out, but it wouldn't be. And I may still, but I think it says a lot that we're at a time when there is grief for our animals is taken so seriously, that there's grief support in some places, not all places, but I think we're seeing that more and more. And I think that is significant to be able to say that the grief we feel, the loss we feel for our cats and dogs and rabbits and our animals, our companions, is significant enough that we need to be able to have the resources to support us getting through it. Of course, I don't have all the answers and I've needed help from others, but I hope that I can be that for you. That's my hope, at least, in sharing all of this. And what makes grief, I think, so much more difficult is when you have any kind of remorse. But I do look back and know that I did everything I possibly could for him. And I think about the amazing 15 years I had with him, who had no ailments his whole life until the very end. So I don't know. Is it easier when it's prolonged and you have time? Is it easier when it's quick? I don't know. It is what it is. But he was a very happy cat, living a very happy life with people who loved him immensely. He couldn't have had it better, and I couldn't have asked for more than him. Their lives are so brief as it is. We just have to know that we love them so intensely and immensely. And that is, I think, the grief is also so much more intense and immense because we have such a short time with them. And so I will continue to love him and continue to give all of my love to Michiko. I know some of you are wondering if I will get another cat. Some of you have asked. I always go with my gut, and my gut right now is telling me to just focus on Michiko. She's really enjoying being an only cat. She's not like Charlie. He would go visit other cats. He would go visit other dogs. Dogs would be here. I've told you, you've seen dogs here. He loves dogs. She's not that. She's not like that. Like I said, the cat that visits at night brings her so much distress. She flips out. And I know that's usually the case when you have a cat inside and there's a cat outside and it's their territory and they can't defend it. But I do not see in any way that Michiko, she's not indicated in the 14 years I've known her that she wants another animal here. And so I'm really honoring that. And I really want to focus on her. I may foster again. That's my intention. But I don't know if it's going to be the same dynamic where I keep the cats separate in my office and Michiko's okay on the other side. When Charlie was with her, I think he added to her comfort. That's why I said I think she's going out less, because Charlie was kind of like her guardian. And I think he was that also when we had foster cats here. So without Charlie here and foster cats in this room, I don't know. I just don't need to know right now. And I don't want to shock her into anything like the way, Schuster and Cassandra were shocked when Charlie came in. And I just don't want to do anything like that right now. I just want to focus on loving her and giving her the space for my attention and my love. And I'm working on providing support and habitat and rewilding for wildlife. And that's what I'm focusing on the outside. I'm supporting the cat rescue organizations, including Cat Town, who we donate to every month. That's who I was fostering with. They're in our will. I find the best sitter I can for Michiko while we're gone. She's as happy as she can be, and that makes me really happy. Very quickly before I end, I want to just call attention to, I asked you on social media to let me know if you had any questions or thoughts about an episode on grief or losing your beloved animals, and if people had any questions for me pertaining to this. And I received some really thoughtful questions. Of course, I appreciate all of your thoughtful thoughts, just your condolences and your love and support. So thank you for that. But I also received some really thoughtful questions, and I want to just address two of them in particular and just brief. Number one is, how do we continue to honor them after they've passed and not feel guilty when we do realize that we can say their name without crying? I really love that question. Something I wrote about my mother and the grief rituals that I lacked when she died, because she died in COVID, as I said, was that I wasn't looking to get over her death. I was looking to get over on the other side of grief. So that means that there comes a time when we don't. Oh, Michiko. As I'm recording this, I can hear Michiko scratching at the door. Hold on. Hold, please. I would normally cut that out, but I thought it was fitting to tell you that Michiko was scratching at the door, and here she is in my office. So, I think we're conflating indifference with moving on to the other side of grief, because it doesn't mean you don't care because you don't feel suffering every day. I think it becomes a different name and a different form. It takes a different shape, and we can call it something different. I don't know what that is, but because we're not feeling like acute suffering every day, that doesn't mean we didn't care. And so I think we need to find a new word for that. And because it's a different place. It moves into a different spot, and it stays there. And that doesn't mean you don't cry sometimes or whatever, but I long for the day when I can say Charlie's name and not cry. I really do. I really do. And that doesn't mean I love him less or miss him less. It just means it doesn't hurt so much. And that hurt gets put into, it's kind of like, I don't know, you make a gin and tonic. Before you make the gin and tonic, you have gin and you have tonic. You make the gin and tonic and it's all integrated, it's all together, and it just becomes all connected. And so that, that grief that on its own was so poignant and acute, now mixed in with just life and all the other feelings, becomes this mixture, this cocktail of a new me that's now built with just a new mixture. There's a new mixture, and we move forward with that new concoction. And every experience we have that builds, right? You keep building new cells and new memories and new experiences that become part of this person you keep moving forward being. And so he's just integrated now into my beingness. And that's what I would say to that, to not feel guilty that you're not crying every day. It just means they're integrated into your heart. That is now part of you rather than something that just hurts all the time. And so I honor him by talking about him, get to the second question, by sharing his story, by putting his picture up, by having him here with us, by being able to visit his grave. saying hello to him when I see his grave, smiling. There are times I can say his name and smile. And even if you don't have your animal buried with you, like I said before, there are ways to create a memorial. That's what I would say, to keep honoring them in those ways, right? That's why it was so meaningful to find the grave that I did for my mother, that David and I will be in one day as well, our ashes one day. So I think having something physical is meaningful. I think when they become just a regular part of our setting, like that integration, everything just kind of settles into a new way. Otherwise, I think we grasp for something to hold on to. And so that's why I think having something physical is really helpful for that. And so, yeah, find something physical, have a memorial stone made, have a photo album made, have a piece of jewelry made, something we can touch. I think all of those things, any of those things, one of those things helps. And finally, there was a question someone asked, besides, I am so sorry, what other words or actions should one use to comfort a friend or family member who is suffering from the death of a pet? I would say, I first of all appreciate that question so much, because I remember when Michael died and people were so afraid to ask me about him. We are not a culture that's comfortable with death. And so it's very hard for someone, they think they're going to, kind of, right, open those wounds up again. And so people don't know how to ask. They don't know what to say. And I remember when Michael died and people were afraid to ask or they struggled, I said, please say his name. Ask me about him. You are not opening up a wound. He is now integrated part of me, and I want him to stay alive, and I want to tell his story, and I want to share who he was. I don't want him to be forgotten. So please say Michael's name. It's not going to break me. If you talk about him, it's going to break me if we stop. And I feel that way about all of the loss. My mother, Charlie, Simon, Schuster, Cassandra, right? Michael, all of it. So please don't be afraid to ask them. If they don't want to answer, if they don't want to talk about it, if it's too painful, then that's okay. They can just say that. Like, I don't think I can answer. I don't want to talk about it. That's okay. But you can ask. I don't think you're stepping over by saying, how are you? But also tell me about them. Tell me about them. Tell me about them. Because it gives them the opportunity to recall something they loved about them. And what I can tell you about Charlie was that he was the most amazing, intelligent, intuitive, brave, light-filled, friendly, resilient, joyful, funny, handsome, social being I have ever known. And I am so lucky to have been his mom for almost 15 years. Thank you so much for indulging me all these years with my stories and photos of Charlie and Michiko. Thank you for listening to this episode. I know it's probably painful, and hopefully it wasn't uncomfortable to hear me speak through tears a few times. I considered shutting off at times when it was pretty acute, and I didn't. I did shut off sometimes when it was acute. So I hope what I left was okay. Mostly, thank you for seeing Charlie, for the animals. This is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for listening.